All right. So if you were somebody that registered for this training and now you're kind of wondering, where the heck am I? Who are these people? Hello, never fear. We are Donor Organizer Hub. We focus on training, coaching, and convening volunteer fundraisers for movement causes entirely free of charge. So that is our core focus, is we are here to make volunteer fundraising as cool as direct actions, as canvassing, as phone banking, whatever the heck else. We also support staff at progressive organizations in building out their volunteer fundraising programs, and we do this at a sliding scale. So just so you can get to know your dynamic duo today, I'll kick off. Hi, I'm Haley. I use they and she pronouns. I'm the executive director at Donor Organizer Hub. Today, my role for this training will be as facilitator. So I'm going to go through what a donor engagement ladder is, different exercises for you to help reflect on the different steps of building your own donor engagement ladder after today. And at the very end, also to answer any questions that you have and support you. My favorite thing about engagement ladders is how they combine organizing and data. I personally am a data girly. Don't worry if you're not, though, because the whole point of a donor engagement ladder is you do things in teams. And oftentimes there's other people in teams that really like data like I do. My favorite autumn treat is those caramel apple candy suckers that kind of like, it's concerning if you bite into them because they might break your teeth, but they just taste so good when you have them. I'm going to pass it over to Ellie.
Hi folks, I'm Ellie, they, them pronouns. I'm the head of operations at Donor Organizer Hub, and I'm doing tech support today. So if you have any issues with anything technical, go ahead and give me a direct message. Love how a donor engagement ladder strengthens your community. And I like pumpkin cheesecake.
Definitely keep sharing your favorite autumn treats in the chat. So if you have any tech questions today, admittedly, I try my best to check in the chat throughout the training, but sometimes I just might be in trainer mode. So feel free to message Ellie. They will take care of you. And together, the two of us are going to support you in learning more about donor engagement ladders. And this training is the third part of a three-part fundraising is organizing series. Ellie will be providing the link for both of these trainings after today's training, the ones that were previous. We started off talking about building a successful fundraising campaign. So thinking about setting goals for yourself, developing a list of people you can ask, crafting an ask. Then the second session, we talked about building a volunteer fundraising team. So transforming donors in your fundraising campaign into volunteer fundraisers themselves. So we talked about identifying, recruiting, and supporting members of your team. We're wrapping out this series today, and this is going to be a little bit of a sort of split off from the prior two, in that the first two trainings were really very campaign focused. It was very much, okay, you're looking to raise X amount of dollars from Y people. You do this one time, you do it a few times. This training here today is assuming that your group, you're looking to fundraise for your cause on an ongoing basis. And the reason that I say that is building a donor engagement ladder is not something that happens overnight, but it is something that is worthwhile because it encourages you to get people to increase their involvement over time with your cause and to reach people beyond your immediate networks. So just to see if we're in the right place, those of us that have done the prior trainings might be familiar with these prompts. Would love for you to put a yes or an emoji in the chat if you've thought of one of these sentences before. We're going to go them one by one. So put a yes or emoji in the chat if you ever thought, I've tapped my networks and my community's networks. I feel like I'm asking the same people and they've donated what they can. And I just feel like the world is small when actually it is big. Yes, yes. Okay, we're getting some yeses here. Perfect. Now, put a yes in the chat if you've ever thought, I have a lot of donors to my cause, but not so many fundraisers. I feel like it's just me, maybe a couple people holding the love and responsibility of fundraising. Getting some yeses here. All right. Put a yes or emoji in the chat if you have ever thought donors to my cause are scattered and they have no idea who each other are. We've got Ellie is a donor here, Matt is a donor over there. They have no idea who each other are. Yep. Okay. How about this one? Put a yes or emoji in the chat if you've ever thought, I don't know how to draw people in outside of my immediate networks. I know how to do that relational game, but I don't know how to bring other people that would otherwise be supportive of my cause into my group. Okay, beautiful. Getting some yeses here. And then a final one. I don't know how to track progress and goals for a donor engagement ladder. It all sounds nice, but how the heck do we do our data tracking? Okay, my friends, it seems like we're in the right place. So today what we're going to do, we are going to define an engagement ladder to transform someone from a stranger, they don't know who the heck you are, all the way to a donor organizer for your cause. So somebody that gives their time, their money, their treasure, all the things to support your cause. That sounds nice, right? We're going to identify your cause's target donor and how to invite them into your cause. So thinking about the very beginning of an engagement ladder, who the heck are these people that you're trying to reach? We're going to learn strategies that build collective trust and community that attracts donors outside of your immediate network. And finally, we'll learn how to build systems to track progress and goals with donor engagement and leadership. I want to repeat to y'all, these are pretty juicy, exciting things that one person alone cannot take on. So if you are somebody where you're like, I'm kind of a solo ranger today, we welcome you to be here and learn, and go back to the second training where we talk about building a team, because it takes a proverbial village to do this, y'all. So commonly asked question, yes, this training will be recorded. You'll get the slides, you'll get the resources. So feel free to sit back and digest however you learn. If you're a note taker anyway, that's great, but also feel free to be present. Q&A is going to be at the end, and I will make this very clear. I am here all night until I guess maybe I have to go to bed, or your questions are answered. So don't think that there's a scarcity of time in getting your questions answered. What we are going to do is we're going to save them for the end. Ellie will be monitoring the chat, so they will lovingly let me know if there's some clarification question, like, I don't understand what's on the slide. We can take some steps back to talk through it. But if it's something really juicy and related to your work, we want to support you. Let's save it for the end. All right. So before we dive in, I would love for each of you to step back and think of a cause that you've made a donation to for the first time recently. What is one reason that you donated? Feel free to share in the chat. So think about a cause that you donated to for the first time. Why did you donate? Anxiety and fear. Yep. Connected to the community. A friend passed and that was a request. Absolutely. Relationship to the person and belief in the cause. Feels good to give. Going to a local library for the first time today. Oh, I love that. It was after attending my first Friends Committee meeting. Loved the community vibe because a person directly asked me. I was asked by a friend to join a planning conversation and wanted to express my support for the work. These are all great answers. Love to hear them. And let's talk through, in terms of data, why people give. Why the heck do they give? And the reason why this is important for an engagement ladder is oftentimes organizers talk about meeting people where they're at. And so answering this question can help us think about where people are when they first donate to our cause. The number one reason by far, and it's very clear, I think it's something like over 50% of people, the reason that they donate is because somebody asked them. There's actually a study that was done, I think about a decade ago, where researchers asked people who contributed to a cause for the first time 1 week after they donated, what's the name of the organization or the cause that you donated to? And half of them didn't have the answer because they originally donated because somebody asked them. Some other reasons that are mentioned, and y'all mentioned them here. reinforcing our identities as principled and generous. This sounds kind of cringe at first. It might feel embarrassing, but we do want to feel like principled and generous people. I will put a sidebar there that some people do want to feel prestigious and important. They want to put their names on hospitals, sure. But that's something that's actually distinct from feeling like you are living out your values through your actions. There was a lot of mention in the chat about being part of a community bigger than ourselves. And donations are a step that people can take very accessibly to feel like a bigger part of our community. More people donate than they vote, than they go to church, than any other civic or community engagement activity out there. So that's something to think about as well. So often on the left, we say, don't just donate. And I invite us all today as we're thinking about engagement ladders, how do we actually invite, okay, wow, you donated, you are signaling to us you are behind our cause. How else can we invite you in? Feeling emotional relief. So feeling guilty, anxious, angry. A lot of us have been there before, some bad news comes out, we want to take action immediately. And another one that is definitely worth considering is, helping themselves and their loved ones, feeling directly connected to an issue because they've experienced it themselves. So, question for you all. And this is thinking on the side of the fundraiser. You're putting your fundraiser hat. So you thought about a donor for a second. Let's think about being fundraisers. What is the most prioritized donor metric for progressive groups? When you're thinking about measuring behavior of a donor, what is the most prioritized metric that we have seen that is just kind of classic on the left when you're thinking about a donor? Let's say Ellie as an example donor. What do we want to measure about Ellie as progressive groups? Quantity given, highest previous contribution, touches ways of being involved, frequency of gifts, retention, time since most recent donation, potential. Love all these answers. They're all beautiful ones. And across the board, 100% of the organizations that we have partnered with, their number one metric that they look at is total dollars contributed per year campaign. So thinking about if Ellie gave, say, $100 last year, will they give $100 this year? Or if they gave $100 for the last campaign that we did, are they going to do $100 or more for this campaign? I want to ask the same question, but thinking about traditional nonprofits. So if you were a nonprofit fundraiser for a hospital, a university, or a church, what is the most prioritized donor metric that you are looking at? What do they look at? When hospitals, universities, and churches think about donors, what do they prioritize the most? It is not a trick question, I promise. It is an agitational question. Giving track record, number of donors, biggest donors. What they look at is total lifetime contributions. And shout out to our friends at Philanthropy Together. They put this really nicely. So thinking about time, talent, treasure, testimony ties. On one hand, you could turn to me and say, yo, Haley, hospitals, universities, churches, they've got big dollars to work with. So of course they can track all these things that we can't. My reflection for all of us today as progressives, as movement people, as organizers, if we're talking about building a base and the numbers that we need to win structural change in our lifetimes, this is a gap that I see worth seeing. And today, what we're going to be exploring is stepping beyond the traditional progressive group, did this person give or not give this year or this campaign type of metric. We're not going to take all the values of hospitals and universities and what they do, but one thing that we are going to play around with today in an experimental space together is thinking about how do we think about a donor based on their total lifetime contributions to our cause. So donor metric tracking over time.
Haley, When we say total lifetime contributions, do we mean total amount given or number of contributions?
That's a great question. And so just going back to that slide really quickly, we are looking at all of their contributions in time, in money. So it is actually kind of, if you think of like a dashboard of things, it's like number of times that they've given, total amounts that they've given. And the reason that I also bring this up here is occasionally we'll hear from progressive groups that we work with about, oh, this person gave 3 times this year. But usually more often than not, it's like they gave $150 total this year. So the traditional nonprofits and how they think about things over the total lifetime, it's thinking about both of those things that you're mentioning. So thinking about metric tracking over time. On the left here, and for those of us that were here at the first training in the series talking about building a successful fundraising campaign, we actually use this as a tool. It's a traditional donor pyramid. And the way that a traditional donor pyramid works, pyramids, it tends to be lots of people or things at the bottom and less as you move up. And where this can be useful for, this tool, is if you're thinking about a one-time campaign, is thinking about, okay, if I'm trying to raise $1,000, I need to secure two $250 donations, 3 $100 donations, so on and so forth. When a donor pyramid is used over time, over a lifetime, the way that it's used, and this isn't a bad thing, this is actually a great analysis to go through, is, okay, somebody gave $25 the first time that they gave to us. Can they become, and we would consider that a small dollar donor. Can we make them a mid-level donor next time? And how do we do that? And maybe for mid-level donors, how can we make them become major donors? So this is something kind of thinking about dollars, thinking about how do we get more dollars each year from the same person over time. Another type of way to do donor metric tracking over time is actually flipping a donor pyramid upside its head. Shout out to the Funding Seed for this framework. And this is kind of where the donor engagement ladder is based on. We're about to get there in a second. I just want to give you all a nice setup here. On the right, when we look at this pyramid, it's actually like a funnel. So it starts out big on top, gets less and less later on. So at the top, we have transactional, surface level, or relationship-based donors. So these are people that gave when we're angry, when we're upset. It could also be, oh, I gave because I know Ellie and I really support Ellie. I don't know anything about this cause or this group. So it's a start, but there's not that connection there to your cause. As you move further down, getting intention and mission-based, that might be shifting from, oh, I gave because I know Ellie, to I gave because Ellie taught me about the importance of this cause, in particular about supporting trans and gender nonconforming people in Portland. And I have stakes in that now too. I care. The final one at the bottom, and this is kind of, we're going to get into some good meat today, is loyal or identity-based giving. And this is something that oftentimes on the left, we really like to separate out our donors from, say, our volunteers. And something that a lot of the traditional nonprofit sector does is they bring them together a bit more. So, you're going to ultimately do what you want for your cause. What we are offering or inviting you to today is thinking about what happens when you build an intentional ladder that allows for someone to feel like they are a real constituent or part of your organization as a donor. So with donor engagement, it's how attentive and involved they are with your organization. And this is also key to very traditional metrics too. So for those of us in the room that are fundraisers, donor retention and upgrading might be terms that are familiar for you. For those of us where it's new to us, retention is saying that somebody gives year over year. So if Ellie gave $100 last year, they give $100 again this year. Upgrading is that they give again, but they give more. So from $100 last year to, say, $150 this year. It's also key to volunteer leadership. With the folks that raised their hands that were saying, hey, I have a lot of donors, but I don't have a lot of fundraisers. Thinking about donor engagement is a key piece to solving that puzzle. And so something that I just want to set us up for before we start going into these frameworks that help us figure out our own donor engagement ladders for our groups, for our communities. We rarely know what a dollar means to a donor. When somebody donates $25 to us, that could be more than they make in an hour. It also could be that they have intergenerational wealth. They could write a check for $25,000, but $25 happened to be their first entry into our cause. People who give small donations often have unseen financial capacity. And I will speak very honestly as somebody that used to work for some wealthy donors in this ecosystem. A lot of times they want to be a part as stakeholders of our causes without being seen entirely as checkbooks. And so they might give a little modest amount just to see what does this organization, what does this cause do with somebody that contributes $25? What happens? What's next? And I'm not saying to make any sort of lottery bets on every single person that gives $25 becomes a $25,000 donor. But what we're saying is here, we can't make assumptions about people from their first gift. And finally, transactional building does not build movements or create meaningful change. Sometimes transactional fundraising really has to happen. We have to rush $1,500 now so this person can make rent tomorrow. And that is valid. And today we're not focused as much on the rapid response piece. We really are thinking about intentional community building and how can we bring people up an engagement ladder. I've been doing a big teaser today. Talk about this engagement ladder. What the heck is it? Engagement ladders as a whole is a tool that's used by base builders, by people that are organizers that are looking to bring more people in for their cause to help them move up from being a stranger or a community member all the way up to a leader. And so we're going to walk through this one by one together, and then we're going to give some time for you to digest it and to think about where people might be getting stuck in your own engagement ladder. So first, we're going to start with observing. Observing is the first introduction, the first impression to your group, especially if you're thinking about extending beyond your immediate network. There's got to be some kind of public or semi-public presence there, whether it's a website, whether you're tabling at an event. So if the person happens to see you at an event, are you welcoming and saying hi and asking if they have questions, kind of like the farmer's market person energy, or are you staring at your phone, miserable, wanting to not be there? That has a difference on people's first impressions of us, right? And same thing for your website. If there are steps to get involved that they can join, okay, amazing. If all the links are broken on your website or you have an events tab where the last event was in 2019, people don't necessarily know what to do with that. So we mentioned observing here because people have to know that you exist, especially if you're trying to see outside of your network. Next up is following. So somebody found you intriguing enough to want to continue to learn more. They sign up for a newsletter, they follow you on social media, webinar, event attendance. They haven't necessarily made any decisions about you and their relationship to your cause, but they're curious. Next up, as we're moving up this ladder, is endorsing. So forwarding or sharing updates from you to their friends. So maybe I have lunch with Ellie after I go to one of your intro meetings and I say, hey, Ellie, I went to this meeting. Here's what happened. It was so cool. Or a newsletter came through my inbox and I forward it to them and say, hey, check this out. Something that's interesting here that I want to name, the next step is donate. And an interesting thing about this, it comes back to behavioral psychology, is people are going to do a lot of endorsing of your organization before they actually donate. It's just commonly how our brains work. We actually tend to talk the talk before we walk the walk. And the next few steps are the ones that we tend to focus on at Donor Organizer Hub when we support volunteer fundraisers and we support movement organizations to build their volunteer fundraising. So owning is volunteering, bringing friends and ideas. And this can sound scary sometimes to folks who are like assuming that donor means a wealthy person that comes in and they have all these wacky ideas that have nothing to do with our goals, our constituency. as we think about this ladder, I invite you to think about, again, kind of all of us being donors, our aunts, our sisters, our neighbors, thinking about those people, not just the most annoying donor that you can think of, because being able to have access to not only their friends, but ideas that they have because they have the more direct experience of being a donor to your cause is actually quite a gift. A whole separate training can be how to set limits on volunteers, but just want to name that, at that point, people feel so invested in you that they're not only donating their time and their money, but they're also bringing what they have to offer, their networks, their ideas. And then finally and ultimately, the dreamscape, right? The dreamscape for all of us is that ultimately these donors take on leadership roles in our group. So that was a lot to digest, right? Kind of going step by step there. What I would love to do, I'm going to set a timer just for 2 minutes, purposely short because we're kind of in a little sprint here today, and also acknowledging that sometimes getting started is the hardest part. I would love for you to journal. You are welcome to do this notes app on your phone, a Google Doc, pen and paper. Which step or steps are people getting stuck in your group? So just to repeat again, for 2 minutes, we're going to pause for you to reflect on this slide here and think about which step or steps are people getting stuck in your group. And I would love to hear from you all right now and see you all in 2 minutes. Or some of you all. What did you share in the chat? Which step are you getting stuck in your group? Where are people getting stuck? So feel free to share in the chat. Which steps are people getting stuck in your group in this engagement ladder? Summit following, summit contributing. Definitely. Following. I can't tell if they're endorsing or not. Yeah, it's a tricky step, right? Because you can't get in their inboxes or sit in a coffee shop with them and their friends and really actually know. Absolutely. So what we're about to enter into next in this training, we're going to go through some different frameworks that are going to help you across different points of this engagement ladder to help folks get unstuck. And we're going to start off with a good old case study from Saddleback Church. Saddleback Church is a church that was built from scratch, started out in Southern California, went up to 20,000 weekly members. So the 8th largest church in the US. And you might be like, Haley, what in the heck are you talking about? Why are we talking about a church today? We're all here as progressives fundraising for our mighty and critical causes. And you know how churches measure their congregants? It's by who tithes, who gives the weekly when they pass around the bucket. It's who gives. It's not just who attends. And the way that they did this, though, the way that they went from 0 to 20,000, the co-founder, Rick Warren, wrote this book called The Purpose-Driven Church, and he gave a roadmap of exactly how he did that. And the big takeaway, and we're going to go into a little bit sort of deep dives into how that looked. They focused on bridge events that met people where they're at, and they moved them up that engagement ladder. So thinking about where your folks got stuck, they also made an engagement ladder for themselves, recognizing that people's first point of contact with the church is not always, or not even majority of the time, like, I'm looking to find God. It might just be like, you hosted a clothing drive and I am in need of clothes right now, or my friend invited me. So they thought about meeting people genuinely where they were and how to bring them on that engagement journey. And so something that we're going to do, I'm going to walk through thinking about how to develop your target constituent, because he highlighted himself something that they really, really dug deep on to be able to bring in more constituents, more congregants, is by defining the target constituent. So for you all, it's your target donor. And what they did was they thought about, okay, becoming an expert on who our target donor is. it's so tempting sometimes to be like, well, Haley, anybody can contribute to us. And, any of us organizers know that if you're trying to bring everyone in, ultimately you bring no one in. Fundraisers in the room, staff fundraisers might know the saying that not every donor is going to be your donor. And so thinking about building an engagement ladder, especially with people that you don't have relationships with, it's important to think of who that target person or persons are. So geographically, demographically, culturally, level of commitment to the issue. And the way that you learn about these things is through the good old one-on-ones and surveys. This could be with past donors. It could be with prospective donors. Something I know I have personally done when I've been trying to learn these things about who is Donor Organizer Hub's target donor is I will just literally ask people in conversations. I'll say, hey, I'm running this organization. We provide free training and coaching for volunteer fundraisers. XYZ, here's the campaign that we have. Be honest with me. Would you donate to that? If you did donate to that, why is that? So it's kind of making, instead of a direct ask, kind of a hypothetical ask for you to gather some of that data. So something to think about as you're thinking about this target donor. And this is a slide, honestly, of all the slides that we're going through today, I personally love and reflect on the most when building our constituency. Before people commit, here's what they want to know. And this is what Rick Warren kind of outlined that he discovered through their data collection process to build out Saddleback Church. They want to know, are they actually needed? Are the dollars that I donate, are the time that I'm providing, if it's I'm donating $5, I'm showing up for a 1-hour volunteer shift, is that actually needed, or are things going to be a-okay without me showing up? What is the benefit in donating or volunteering to them? And this isn't like give them a free iPad kind of benefit. It genuinely is thinking about, okay, once they donate, how does maybe their identity or their role shift even a little bit? How does their connection shift to your cause? And how do both of those things make them feel that their actions and their values are aligned? And what is expected or required for them if they donate or volunteer? Oftentimes people see this question, they're like, oh, we need to make the barriers as low as possible. You don't have to do, have any experience, you have any this or that. We'll take your $2. We'll take your 20 minutes. And actually a lot of people really right now, especially in the loneliness epidemic that we're experiencing, people like a little bit of commitment. That's why, in part, individual giving overall is down, but monthly giving is up, even in times of serious recessions. It's because honestly, recurring giving gives a lot of us this feeling of, oh my God, every month I am contributing to this cause that's greater than myself. Will they make friends? Sometimes we are so in the weeds as organizers and fundraisers, we're thinking about strategy, big picture, outcomes. We forget that for most of us, we're just at the preschool, stage in the playground looking for somebody to go on the swing set with in life. We want to make friends. Are there opportunities for people to make friends? So we're going to take another couple of minutes, sort of sprint style, for you to journal out about your target donor. Now, we're not expecting that you in 2 minutes are going to know all of the ins and outs of who your target donor is. You deserve more time and grace, and you're going to get a lot more of that through research that you do on your own time. But we want to give you this as a prompt for you to unblock yourself so that you can kind of get started in thinking about it. So some questions that you can think about in journaling about your target donor. Who is your target donor? Geographically, demographically, culturally. What is their level of commitment to the issue or cause that you are working toward? They're directly impacted or know a lot. They know a little, but not a lot. They don't know about the issue at all. Or they know about the issue, but they don't care. There are those people, right? And so I am going to set another timer for us of 2 minutes again, and then we're going to return back. This is really just meant to be the beginning. You're going to discover so much more over time and who that target donor is for your cause. And, just to kind of wrap up on our little case study here on Saddleback and growing your donor base, this is specifically how they built out their membership base and put in a book that, as was shared in the chat, all progressives love, creating an atmosphere of acceptance. In part, that is welcoming and acknowledging, oh, hey, if you're here for the first time because a friend invited you or because you had nothing to do today and it just seemed interesting to show up at the library where we're hosting this event, whatever it is, it's warm and welcome. I think sometimes on the movement left, when we host any kind of gatherings with donors and briefings, we kind of assume that people are already very focused on the issue and want to dive in. And if we're especially thinking about those sort of lower ladders of engagement, expanding ourselves to think about all the reasons that they might be at that particular step in the ladder. Monitoring effectiveness on a regular basis. And so asking first-time donors to give their frank and honest impressions. This is where the data side things comes in. It doesn't have to be super fancy. It could be as simple as, when you send a thank you or gratitude email to somebody that contributes to your cause, you could ask them a couple of questions in the email, or if you do phone banks, just kind of thinking, how did you hear about us? What made you, interested in donating? The more formal girlies, if you have a list of, say, more than 100 donors that you're working with for your cause, it could be worthwhile to build out a donor survey to get some data and learn more about why people donate for the first time to help support them in moving up the ladder. This final one, offering something they can't get anywhere else. And this one is something, that I can't necessarily, prescribe for you. It's tapping into what is your North Star, but also what is the community that you want to build. Very lovingly, if we focus by issue only, and I say this so lovingly because I'm obsessed with all of y'all's causes. There are a lot of groups out there that work in similar causes. There are a lot of groups out there that are focused on whatever your theory of change is, whether it's disruption, electoral, whatever else. And I'm not saying, like, totally drop everything to figure out this special sauce, but really thinking about, if you have something, even if it's just the three of you on your team, what keeps all of you there? Being able to articulate that so that you can bring that to others as well as they come in. Empathy maps. So now that we have a target donor, this next tool that we're talking through right now is something to help us dive a little deeper and think about really, in a practical sense, meeting people where they're at. So this is a tool that's actually used commonly by marketers. So, people that are saying they're trying to get you to drink more Coca-Cola or whatever capitalist things. We're going to put the history aside here because it can be a really great tool for us as we organize people to move up an engagement ladder, to really get an understanding of our target group. So it focuses kind of on one person. You can kind of give them a name. You can be like, my target donor is Ellie. Shout out to Ellie. They're always the example in all of our Donor Organizer Hub trainings, but thinking about the before and after of their interaction with your group. And so this is an exercise. We're going to very quickly go through the overview of it and asking some questions together for you to journal on. This is something I strongly recommend doing in full with your group, because it enables for you to make stronger decision-making on how you build out that donor engagement ladder so that people are getting less stuck at various steps. Okay, so looking at this little empathy map here, it goes through 7 questions that you kind of work around as you go through their face. The top 2, who are we empathizing with and what do they need to do? We've kind of already started to cover today or started to unlock. But as we kind of go around the empathy map, we start to ask, okay, what do they see? What do they see in their immediate environment? What do they see others in their lives doing and saying? What are they watching and reading? Then we get into what are they saying? So how are they digesting the information that they're seeing and sharing what they're seeing? What have we heard them say? What can we imagine them saying? The 5th step, so moving down here, is what do they do? What are their actions or behaviors? What do they do today? What behavior have we observed? What can we imagine them doing? The sixth one is hear. So you're kind of seeing that we kind of go through more or less the senses, but just kind of like how a human being operates throughout the world. So hearing, what do they hear others say? What are they hearing from their friends, their colleagues? What are they hearing secondhand? Just kind of really, being able to see like, how is their worldview being built? And then for the final questions, we get into that good old little head of theirs. What are they thinking and feeling? So what are their fears, their frustrations, their anxieties? But also what are their hopes, their needs, and their dreams? So what we're gonna do, think about your target donor, give them a name if you would like, and we're actually gonna spend another couple of minutes starting to think about this. Again, I would recommend bringing this to your team so that you all can reflect on this more deeply together, but I want you to be able to start thinking about this target donor. What do they see? What do they say? What do they do? What do they hear? So I'm going to put another timer of 2 minutes for you to have some starter reflections here and journal this out. See you in 2. I would love to hear from some of y'all in the chat. So we're moving away from seeing, saying, doing, and hearing, and we're starting to tap into what are they thinking and feeling? What does one want, need, hope, or dream of your target donor? So share in the chat after you've had a second to reflect. What does one want, need, hope, or dream of your target donor? Absolve them of guilt, build a better world. To elect a person who will really represent them. That their children and grandchildren can participate in something that is very important to them. Wow, it's almost like donors are humans, right? And this is something that you can continue to reflect on as an exercise when you were kind of stuck on like, what the heck is going on right now? That there's these big stakes coming up in November. There's all these things going on in the world right now. Sometimes these questions can help ground ourselves and remind ourselves that the constituents that we're trying to reach are human beings with hopes, needs, and dreams, just like us. How cute. Recruitment types. Okay, so we've gone through the steps of thinking about target donor, starting to build out an empathy map for them, thinking about what are their current behaviors and where they want to be headed. There are 2 types of recruitment: to bring new donors in, to bring new volunteers into your organization. One's attractional, one's relational. And I'll say straight up, we've talked quite a bit about relational so far in this training series. So if you are very curious about her, go check back on those trainings. The recordings are very available in the YouTube. So we'll start with relational first, but then we're going to really emphasize the rest of today on attractional. Relational recruitment, looking at the right, it's building using existing networks through ensuring that everyone has a list of people that they're inviting. So this is very useful when prior trust is needed or preferred. This is something that's very common if you're sort of a disruption or direct action focused cause. That is very important. It's also great because it can be used outside of a big moment. An example could be tasking volunteers with bringing 3 friends to a house party, a fundraising house party that you might be hosting. So a key question is, who do we want to bring in through relationship? But centering on attractional recruitment, a new addition in this 3rd part in the training series. Attractional recruitment is bringing people outside of your immediate network by optimizing on high energy moments. I will say we work across different theories of change at Donor Organizer Hub, and it seems like most everybody right now is in a high energy moment. So that is where we are at today. It's something that's useful for big moments or public events where people can find out what you do by seeing you in action. It could be something as silly and cute as the town next door to me. I live in Oakland, so in Berkeley, there's a sports apparel place. I don't know, I'm not a sports person, but they will regularly host volunteer-led groups to do phone banks literally in the middle of the store. So you're kind of like, well, Haley, a lot of our stuff is so, you're not that behind the scenes, my friends. There's always some way to demonstrate what you're doing to people outside of your networks. Community events and house parties, tabling at events. Those are some examples. And so it's thinking about, how do we attract people through people seeing us in action, through seeing us living into our values. So we're gonna do an exercise, y'all. So thinking about recruitment, it's no surprise to any of us, and probably a lot of us are here right now because recruiting and retaining donors is challenging for grassroots groups. So if we're thinking about getting to that step in the ladder where somebody goes from endorsing to donating, there's reasons for it. There's some barriers. People might not have enough time or resources to research where to donate. People don't think that their ideal donor, stereotypes of white, wealthy, well-connected, they're like, oh, that's rich people stuff. I don't need to do that. Donors don't feel like they're making a difference, that their $5 isn't making a difference. People forget that they committed to donate. That's a common one that we hear when folks are knees deep in their fundraising campaigns is, hey, we have all these people who said yes, but they didn't contribute. What do we do? So what we're gonna do, it's gonna be a two-parter, okay? First, we're gonna give some time for you to think about all the ideas that you have to address these barriers. And I want you to put in your sort of yes and improv hat here. Write down all the ideas you've got. They don't have to be great. Nobody's gonna find out. Just write them down. And then after that, there's a step where we'll share so that we'll have some collective resources together on different recruitment ideas. But before we get there, I'm gonna be wild. I'm gonna give us 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes this time. And then we're gonna circle back together with some recruitment ideas. As you're jotting down your last thought, would love to hear from you. Share at least 1 or 2 of your favorite ideas in the chat. The reason being, Ellie and I have been collecting answers to this question, multiple trainings over time. And let me tell you, there's a juicy document that's going to be in your inbox soon, but we'd like to add more. People who don't think they're ideal donors, let them know how much it means for them to be a part of your community. Love that. I'm thinking about updating 2 donors on progress on an initiative, and it's been a time-bound nature. For example, in 5 weeks, we are launching. Oh yeah, urgency. She's a good friend, so getting that follow through, I think you're spot on with that one. We straight up tell people they're making a difference on the donation page. Recurring grassroots giving is the #1 way to make an impact because it ensures that our work is well resourced and aligned with our values. For the not enough time to research folks, you might offer a vetted portfolio of groups to donate to, like the Movement Voter Project, or offer up expert validators who are trusted by the donors, like an advisory board of experts or a seal of approval, candidate or charity navigator. One thing I have done is talk about, for the forgetting to donate, is I ask them ahead of time how they want to be reminded in what interval. Love all of these. Y'all are entering your wisdom into a beautiful document that you will receive with others' documents over time, what their thoughts are here. So you can return to that. And it doesn't end here. You can do this recruitment exercise with your group too. This is something we strongly recommend doing, especially if folks are getting stuck on the endorsing side of things, or they're getting stuck on the donate. So the first step is brainstorm, like we did now. That was the step that we did together, just having time to write it down. Second step for that is a design telephone. And all these steps are going to be sent to you, by the way, in an exercise after this. So don't feel like you need to memorize this, but the way that design telephone works is you take the ideas that you have and you pass them to somebody else within your group. So if you're in a physical space, it's passing the person your left. If you're in a virtual space, think of whatever that equivalent might be. And what they do with that, with your ideas, is they add to them. It's kind of a yes and improv moment. So if I wrote down and passed off to Ellie do a reminder call for somebody that said they donate. Ellie might be like, and you thank them for their pledge when you call them. But just kind of adding on to the idea so they can be as sharp as they can be. Then what you do is you kind of share out to the group ideas that you had and what people added to your ideas. And data collection, could be just as simple as handing all the index cards to a data entry person. If you do it virtually, data collection becomes pretty easy because people can just kind of copy and paste them to one Google Doc, so you have all that information together. So minimum needed, I've done this for groups as short as 15 minutes and 3 people. So you don't need a lot to be able to start coming up with some cool ideas there that align with your work. Here is perhaps the juiciest slide of tonight. At the top, we asked, raise your hand if you feel like your donors don't know each other. And some exciting data came through this year. And I think a lot of our donor engagement officers in the room will be like, yeah, this has been true all along. And I know this in my career. When donors know other donors, their lifetime value, so that's the value that, hospitals, universities, churches, they're thinking about, their lifetime value increases by as much as 4 to 5 times. And their giving is resilient even during economic uncertainty, like inflation times. I'm going to do a quick nerdy thing of just going through the data behind that. You don't need to digest this in full, but this is the psychology behind this data that we're talking about here, just so that you can start kind of understanding why donors knowing other donors leads to such fruition in donations for us all. So this is called a self-validation feedback loop. This was created by this married couple, Katrina and Otis. They run this organization called Turnkey that's focused on peer-to-peer fundraising, and they have studied medical-based peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns. So thinking like Relay for Life, both the volunteers and the donors for multiple decades. And this is a framework that they discovered. So the first step is that we seek out groups of people who share our values, our ideas, or interests. Let's say I just became a parent. I'm looking for other people that also just became a parent. Thinking about your own cause and thinking about the target donor that you have. And, when we went through the empathy map, there's a shared experience or set of experiences that your people are going through and that they want to connect around. If the group's a good fit for us, these interactions reinforce their identity. So if I'm a new parent, I join a new parent group, it's reinforcing my identity as a new parent. As I become a less new parent, oh my gosh, I'm becoming a mentor to these new parents. So my identity both can be developed and it also can shift in my time with a group. So the result is called a self-validation feedback loop. Haley, why the heck do we care? We're talking about fundraising. This feedback loop builds trust, which makes us more likely to support the community and its goals, like donating and fundraising. And trust is kind of the backbone for those of us to do things that we haven't tried before. For some of us, it might be adding a 0 to a check. For other people, it might be asking a friend for money, but building that flourishing community is sort of that baseline to get that trust.
Real
Okay,
quickly,
Haley, that sounds cute. How does that look in practice? Ellie, yes.
for the when donors know other donors, we've got a question. What does know mean in this context? Do we know from the source?
Donors knowing other donors is they have some kind of acquaintanceship, friendship, like probably you would know a first and last name. They see each other multiple times. So I would say the definitions, and this is a great question. The research was saying that people know each other by name, so probably first and last name, and they probably had more than one encounter with one another. And this could be virtually or in person. Is that supportive? Perfect. Okay, great. So communication types. How does this look in practice? Where do we kind of, start to build that out? This is going to walk through 4 different communication types that groups can do with donors. And we're going to take a second to reflect, where's my group at? What are we doing here? So in order of impact on identity, and this is going from lowest to highest impact on identity. The first is from the organization to the donor. So thinking of like a newsletter, thinking of like a webinar briefing where the chat is sort of off except for Q&A. It's like the organization is sharing information with the donor. The next one, this is building a bit more of an impact on our identity here as donors when we're thinking on the donor side of things. Donor to organization. So maybe they reply to your newsletter. Maybe they reach out after they promise to make a gift and they're like, hi, where do I send a check to? But they're reaching out to you directly. The next one, and this is kind of the endorsement step of the engagement ladder, is donor to outsider. So forwarding the newsletter to a friend, inviting the friend perhaps to, join you on a webinar. The final step is that donor to donor piece. So thinking about community. And what this research has found, and this has come from, the sort of big nonprofit world, is when you focus on number 4, you're going to raise more money and bring in more people. And so I have a question for you all. Feel free to share in the chat. Which communication types of these 4 listed here do you currently have in your group? Which of these 4 communication types do you currently have in your group? 1, 2, some but very little. 4, 1, 2, 4, not sure about 3. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns with 3s, right? And we were talking about it with the endorsement step. Most of the time directed to number 1. Totally. 1 and 3. We recently created a WhatsApp group for our key leaders. Not so much focused on fundraising, but building relationships with each other, which could yield gifts. Absolutely, Maureen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or sorry, 1, 3, 4. Not sure about 2. Well, that's great info to reflect on, y'all. So what's a real world example here? I've been talking academic fluff nonsense. Where does this and how does this show up by progressives in our ecosystem? So there's an organization called Flip the Vote. They are a mostly volunteer-led organization that their whole purpose is they raise funds for BIPOC and youth-led organizations through virtual and in-person house parties. So their entire model is they are a house party machine. They just keep on pumping them out. And I believe their average house party yields something like 30,000, and they have a minimum of 10,000 that they ask that hosts raise. Something that they do to build a community for their hosts, there are these people who sign on to invite their networks, and they host, sometimes not just one party, but multiple parties across different parts of their network, is they facilitate small group sessions for hosts to meet each other and share their hopes and anxieties. And these sessions actually have nothing at all to do with strategy of house parties. They have separate things for those. But what they do to build loyalty in their community and their host community is they facilitate these small group sessions for people to share how they're feeling, like how are they feeling before a certain presidential nominee dropped out? How are they feeling afterward? How are they feeling with this piece of news cycle that came out? And something to think about here, okay, that sounds nice, but what is the impact of that? Each house party that they host generates 2 to 3 more house parties. So they're a cool group, just something to think about. So that kind of segues into base building activities. That's an example of an activity that strengthens group relationships, brings new donors into your group, and strengthens existing donors' identity with your cause. So the key thing with a base building activity is there's actually not a huge fundraising component to it. So this could be things like cultural events, political ed events, listening sessions, focus groups, lunches and learns, happy hours, trainings. What we've been seeing a lot, especially I would say in the summertime, we saw people doing half action parties, half social time. So maybe they do a friend bank or a phone bank or letter writing. Question for you all. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 meaning my group has tried none of these, 5 meaning my group has tried all of these, what would you rate your group's experience with these base building activities? So a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is you haven't tried any of these yet. 5 is, oh my God, I've done all of these things. I'm such an expert here. What would you rate your group's experience with these base building activities? 4, 2, 2, 3, this is something that y'all can return to, just to kind of bring back to your groups and think about, again, where you're trying to unblock people at different parts of the ladder. Is there an opportunity for us to build base with prospective and current donors in our networks and beyond? So another example of a base building event that's done by everyday people that, and this organization has absolutely no staff, so they're entirely volunteer run. It's called Force Multiplier. They were originally based in the Boston area, have since, because of the virtual nature of Zoom, have expanded nationally. They focus on fundraising for key congressional candidates as well as electoral and voter empowerment groups. They host point of entry events that have absolutely no fundraising in them. So they basically go in, they talk about what Force Multiplier is, who the people are, what they do, what the impact is. But they don't make a fundraising ask afterward. They actually make 3 asks of attendees, and you could kind of checkbox all or some. Hosting a point of entry event yourself, becoming a multiplier, they call it, and it's basically somebody that reaches out to their networks to invite them to upcoming fundraisers they have. They host these fundraising events on Zoom, and they also offered for you to join an email list for invitations to those Zoom events for candidates and orgs. And they are also powerhouses. As an all volunteer team, they raise something like $7 to $10 million a year. So there can be a lot of power that happens when thinking about how can we continue to scale these opportunities to build base. So something that we don't have time to go into full detail today, but I want to give a preview for you all to consider. It's a really nice complement to an engagement ladder, is what's called a journey map. And so a journey map is another tool out there. It's for teams to be able to see their supporters' experiences and emotions as they move through an organization. So thinking about kind of that first step where they first have awareness of your organization, all the way to taking on a leadership role. It includes touch points with the organization and then their own pain points and emotions. And it helps people understand their supporters' perspective and identify areas of improvement. So what we're going to do now, whoa, big table, right? Lots of information. We're not going to have a chance to digest this all today or for you to build one yourself, but we want to give you some exposure to how it could look like when you're thinking about building a donor engagement ladder. So if we look at the far left, we have these different rows. One is the stage that's thinking about kind of where the donor is on the ladder of engagement with your group. And then we get into, this is kind of complementary to an empathy map here, what are they doing, thinking, and feeling? There's a final one here down at ideas. We talked about this in the last session about sort of the 3 characteristics that build a thriving team, that build leaders, is, their experience with autonomy, relatedness, and competence, more social psychology for us. But what this does is it allows a little bit of an assessment check at each level to think, are we providing supports for that person to move up to that next point in the journey map? I'm going to pause now, and I would love for you to share in the chat, what's one observation that you see on this table here? Folks are always feeling nervous. Their capacity for it grows over time. Absolutely. How much hesitation or guilt may be present, even as people are stepping up to contribute? Yeah. We're all just vulnerable babes figuring it out. All right, y'all. There was so much thrown at you, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions. But we're gonna rush through these slides, and I'm happy to return to them for you. But potential roles, again, it takes a real team to do this. If you're a solo actor right now, let's go back to the second training and talk about building teams. Here's some potential roles that you could have for folks to support in building a donor engagement ladder. First up, recruitment lead. So identifying opportunities for your group to show your work in action. So that's thinking about, oh, there's this farmer's market event. Oh, okay, we can, I don't know, put flyers at the local library. They're kind of finding those opportunities where you can show yourselves out to the public outside of your networks. A welcomer is somebody that once the person comes on, maybe comes to a first event, becomes a donor for the first time, they onboard new donors, they support their movement along the engagement ladder, buddy system, whatever it might be. Feedback facilitator. So that's where we're talking about developing those questions and methods for gathering feedback of prospective new and existing donors. Complementary to that is a data head, somebody that tracks and analyzes donors' progress on that engagement ladder over time and can share out with the team. And then a leadership coach. So kind of thinking about those top prongs of the engagement ladder. If somebody is fundraising in their networks for their first time, if they're stepping into a leadership role for the first time, they need extra love and support. So a leadership coach helps people at the highest levels of engagement take action. So tracking and goal setting. This is not something we're going to too deep today, although we are happy to support you and we'll talk about those supports look like beyond today. But at a high level, what you want to be able to do with your team is think about what are you going to use to track your donors' progress on an engagement ladder. It can be spreadsheets. If y'all are fancy CRM girlies, that's great. Think about how to plug that in. Start small, improve over time. If literally you're just getting a bunch of first and last names together, oh my gosh, amazing. That's a first step. How can you build that? Thinking about what are your 1 to 3 most important metrics. Sometimes people get very excited with tracking and they want to track everything. Keep things simple, 1 to 3 metrics, review the progress weekly together, and keep asking yourselves, where are people getting stuck? You can refer to those resources that we have today. So for volunteers in the room, we offer totally free coaching. It starts as a 15-minute session. It can go from there. The 15-minute session is entirely a triage process. You come to us and say what ideas, what challenges, what sticking points you're facing, and we support you. So we do from there complimentary coaching sessions, as many as you like and need, to make your fundraising dreams come true. So Ellie's sharing in the chat, you're going to get follow-up for this link. Strongly recommend using this. It's a service that is here for y'all. For staff in the room, we love you. And a free offering we have for you is we have a monthly drop-in staff community of practice. It is focused specifically on organizing donors, not just engaging, not just retaining, not just upgrading, how to engage. It is a busy time for our nervous systems if you are a staff fundraiser, and we have an energy take back session that'll be next week on Tuesday that is going to support your nervous systems. Nydia Cardenas, a brilliant team, will be walking through a time that really drained our energy, a time that really energized us. We compare the two, we take some notes, we bring that with us for our end of year fundraising. Isn't that beautiful? And now we come to the last quick part. I would not be living into our values if I did not also name that hello. We would love for you to invest in us. If you found any value in today, guess what? Over the next 2 months, we are doing 12 free trainings. We are, I think, 5 trainings in of the 12. We coach, we train, we support anybody on the progressive left, whether you're electoral, whether you're inside outside, whether you are a mutual aid girly. If you have a bunch of people in your life that are scrolling on social media right now, doomsday posting, and they're not taking action, and you want support on how to get them to take action, that is what we're here for. It costs $1,000 to put on trainings like this entirely for free, thinking about all the labor, the content creation, and the follow-up support that comes after them. And we are very excitingly halfway there. And so I would love to check in with you all. My owning class girlies in the room, can you contribute $1,000 for a training today? My middle class folks in the room, can you step up with $100? Working class and poor folks in the room, can you contribute $10? Every single dollar that you put to use is going to be supporting turning donors into fundraisers, fundraisers into leaders across our movement. It is an investment not only in yourselves, but the other people out there that don't yet see themselves in the progressive ecosystem. Ellie put, I believe, a link in the chat for ways to contribute. I'm going to count to 5 seconds, and I swear to God and promise you all the time in the world for all of your questions.